Hi, Francesca.
Hi, Jean. How you doing?
Great.
I'm very happy to be here and be interviewing Jean Freuder. This is a series of video that the Association of Constraint Programming organizes um, with interviews to the recipients of the ACP Research Award winners. Jean, in particular, was the recipient of the first award, research award in 2005, and then many others followed. But Jean is much more than the recipient of the research award of ACP. Is a really pioneer in the area of constraint solving and constraint programming and reasoning. So I'm really very happy to be here. My name, by the way, is Francesca Rossi. As I said, I was president of the ACP at that time, but I worked in that area for a long time. So I've known Jean. I don't remember since when. We don't want to know. We don't too long ago. Um, Okay, so let's start from the beginning, I guess. So how did you get interested in computers? What is your first experience with computers?
Well, actually, I think my first experience with computers was in building a science fair project in junior high, seventh or eighth grade. I built a computer, if you want to call it that. Of course, it wasn't a general purpose computer, but I built a machine that played tic-tac-toe. Actually, it played reverse tic-tac-toe, which means the first one to get three in a row loses. Um, and it consisted of a big box that my junior high shop teacher helped me build. And on the front was the tic-tac-toe grid and some light bulbs indicating the moves. And in the back was a mess of wires and some switches. I think I'd made out of copper somehow. And the human player would tell me their move, and I would move a switch to indicate to the machine what the move was, and a light bulb in the front would light up for their move and for the machine's move. Uh, Unfortunately, I think I made a tactical error in the human-machine interface there, because the person in front would tell me their move, and I would be in back doing something in back there, and I think there was a suspicion that I was actually making the machine's move, when I wasn't. But I think maybe I learned something about human-machine interfaces there.
Mhm.
And I didn't win first prize. I think I won the second prize. But somebody, a friend of our family, afterwards suggested that I patent it and maybe market it, I guess.
Mhm.
But my family didn't know anything about that sort of thing, so nothing ever happened. But maybe if we had, I would be known now as a father of computer gaming. In fact, I did a little Googling recently, and I found what some people believe to be the first commercially available handheld electronic game, and it was a tic-tac-toe game.
Oh, you see?
And this was years after my junior high experiment. So, the road not taken. Maybe I would be sitting here being inducted into the Gaming Hall of Fame instead of talking about the Association of Constraint Programming.
Okay, that's interesting. So then afterwards, so did you study computer science as your undergraduate studies?
Actually, I didn't. I'm not even sure there was a computer science major back then. I majored in mathematics, but I kind of began drifting towards computer science in some sense. I got interested in mathematical logic. I think mathematics started to become too abstract even for me, and it sounds counterintuitive, perhaps, but I somehow got the idea, I guess, that mathematical logic at least had a subject, even if the subject was just mathematics. And so I started studying logic, and in those days, at least, the logic at Harvard, where I was studying, was in the philosophy department. Quine was there, and Hilary Putnam. Uh, and then I did my honors thesis on undecidable theories, which is a wonderful thing to do a thesis on, undecidable theories.
Okay. So then how did you, so you went from mathematics a little bit to computer science, but then how did you get into AI?
Uh, First I got into computer science at uh, Wisconsin, University of Wisconsin. I went there for grad school. Again, they had some giants of logic. They had Kleene and Rosser, but I continued to drift toward computer science. I took some basic computer science. I learned how to program machine language and Fortran, and those are the days when we literally punched holes in pieces of cardboard, fed them into some machine, and then waited around to get these huge pieces of paper that had the results on it. And you prayed that whatever bug was there, and of course there was going to be a bug, that it wouldn't require you re-punching holes in too many cards. Um, but I also took some automata theory. In automata theory, there are Moore machines and Mealy machines. And Moore, the actual Mr. Moore, or Professor Moore, was at Wisconsin. So and he was quite as I recall, quite an interesting, jovial kind of fellow. Then I ended up back in Cambridge, and I was MIT was down the street, and I thought I'd take some courses there. And I guess I looked through the catalog, and AI sounded interesting, so I took some AI. I remember I did a project again on tic-tac-toe. So here's a tic-tac-toe rearing its head again. This was I believe, to get the machine to learn how to play tic-tac-toe better. So an early kind of machine learning, no deep learning or LLMs or anything like that. But it may have helped me to get a job at MIT in the MIT AI lab. So I became part of the research staff and later became a grad student there.
Okay, good. And then, so this is AI, but how did you get into constraint reasoning?
So I was working on machine vision and in particular on interpreting line drawings of blocks, two-dimensional line drawings as three-dimensional objects, which involve labeling the lines with as convex or concave or whatever. And it turns out the scene labeling problem is a constraint satisfaction problem.
Yeah, like we know work also David Walls and others on
Yeah,
that.
I was working on the copy demo in the AI lab.
So what is this MIT copy demo?
So this was interesting in that there was an attempt to bring together different parts of AI. So it involved vision, involved language, involved some planning, I guess. We would put a configuration of blocks. We're working, there's a lot of work in those days in the lab in the blocks world as a kind of simplified world to help approach these new problems of intelligence and machine intelligence. And we had these white painted little blocks, and we'd put them in front of a camera in some configuration. And the idea is we were supposed to be able to look at those blocks and figure out what was there in some sense with a camera, and then build a copy of that configuration. Actually, I think it was a mirror image copy, so we have reverse blocks, reverse tic-tac-toe. Uh, and the hardware in those days was like huge. We had a camera that was like, big tube, and we had an arm that was this huge clunky arm. There's a story that one day the arm started vibrating and moving across the room, and back Jerry Sussman, who's a brilliant AI person, was into a corner, and fortunately somebody found the off switch. So it's like an early version of one of these science fiction AI run amok stories. I don't know if it's true, but it's a good story.
Yeah. So yeah, early days, but a lot of yeah, you say
Yeah.
a lot of dimensions in that project, in that demo. no?
Yeah, there's actually some videos of available still at MIT, some MIT website. It's interesting to see those early videos. I think I got a screen credit on one of them. It's one of the programmers or something. And Bertold Horn has a web page that talks about the copy demo, and it's if you want to Google for that, it's something interesting to look at.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So, was that part of your graduate studies, or was it before or in parallel?
So I started out as a member of the research staff and then moved into becoming a grad student and started work on a thesis, again in vision, but this time going beyond blocks, I was actually trying to look at hammers, or at least one. I may have just had one hammer that I got from my father's toolbox, I guess, some big sledgehammer or something. Uh, the uh, um, the lab was quite interesting, of course, in those days, quite exciting to be there. It's early days. The physical plant was kind of interesting. We were in a building in Technology Square, which was aptly named, sort of on the fringes of the MIT campus. I suspect it wasn't actually owned by MIT, but we had a space in that building. And one thing I recall is that at one end of one of our floors, we had this big empty space, which I think we called the playroom. There was actually a platform and an indentation at one end, which I think was supposed to hold a waterbed, but they decided structurally that wasn't a good idea. Sort of maybe a precursor to these West Coast companies, tech companies with all their fringe benefits. So there was a partial wall that had a big blackboard on one side and a bulletin board on the other, and we could hold seminars there. People could, talk to each other at Blackboard, but it's basically a big empty space. And I think that was unusual in those days. I mean, nowadays you see these new buildings with these huge atriums and all these places for people to gather informally. But I think in those days, this kind of space was unusual. I think people would come by the lab and they seemed really impressed with that space. And I think I figured out that it was because it indicated that we were really rich, that we could afford to have such an empty space.
Mm-hmm.
I had an office that kind of opened onto that space, and I shared the office for a while with Dave Waltz, who was a wonderful guy, almost a larger-than-life figure. And he was working on his thesis in Vision on expanding the labeling to include scenes with shadows.
Mm-hmm.
And my most vivid memory from that time is seeing the drawings that Dave would make, because he would draw all these little junctions, the corners with the lines coming in and labeled as convex or concave or whatever. And because he'd added shadows, there were lots more junctions and lots more labeling. And if I drew a junction that, it would look like cat scratching, but he was an artist, it was like calligraphy. I just loved to see them. And the so that's my memory of my office. I of course had to go through the usual rigmaroles of being a grad student. I had an oral exam, and that was turned out to be kind of funny in a way. I was working in vision, so somebody in the exam committee asked me the question, why, when you look in a mirror, is the image reversed?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the kind of question, like, first it just seems silly. Of course, but why is it reversed, And, it's like, and, I mean, I could tell you how to label a scene. I knew nothing about mirrors. And fortunately, conscious, consciously or accidentally, I took advantage of a good heuristic for oral exams, I think. The members of the committee started discussing it among themselves because it was an interesting question of why is it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I just sort of got out of that alive somehow and went on to complete my thesis. The thesis was in uh, machine learning and uh, was doing something I called active vision and trying to recognize a hammer. Nowadays, of course, you would just point your program at the web and look at like a gazillion hammers, and then you can recognize a hammer.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, so then from your graduate studies, I think you, as a teacher, a professor, you spent many years in the University in New Hampshire. What can you tell us about that experience?
Well, I first went to Wisconsin for a year after I got my, and then I came back to New Hampshire for family reasons to be near family, and it's a nice place, but it was a very small department. In fact, it wasn't even a department when I got there. It was part of the math department, and so we spent time, setting up a department and setting up a PhD program. And I set up a small lab, which I call the Constraint Computation Center, 3C.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that you will bring with you wherever you went. So after many years in University in New Hampshire, you moved to Ireland, where you brought your CCC with you, right?
Yes, and I was pleased that because I was going to Cork in Ireland, I was able to
Yes.
call it 4C, the Cork Constraint Computation Center. Jim Bowen, who's a professor at Cork, University College Cork, uh, told me about this opportunity. The Ireland was setting up a science foundation, and one of the first things they did was to set up these large investigator grants intended, I think, at least in part, to attract people from overseas. So I applied for one of those, and I got it. I thought it would be an opportunity to build something bigger than I had ever been able to or expected to be able to build in New Hampshire, and something also that would last because I suspected that it was a small department still, and I suspected that when I got around to retiring, that my lab would retire with me, and so I moved to Cork, and it worked out. We established a big lab, building on what Jim Bowen already had there, and called it 4C. And it also, I was particularly uh, pleased that the size enabled us to support a lot of students and a lot of postdocs. Uh, and we also built something that was able to last because that's worked out as well. As you know, Barry O'Sullivan has taken over and done a wonderful job. Uh, there was a slight disappointment with the name in that the name 4C hasn't really been able to survive because around the time I was retiring, the Science Foundation decided they wanted to establish this big sort of national mega lab, which brought together various individual labs, 4C being one of them. And they wanted, sort of one-stop shop branding. And so everything was supposed to be the Insight brand. It was the Insight Center for Data Analytics. And so, I was a little, so we built up this 4C brand in the community, the constraints community, and in our local community, but everything's Insight now.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So then after many years in Ireland, you came back to the US. So what can you tell us about your, back in the US new experience?
Back in the USA, so I eventually just became homesick. Homesickness I think is like the color blue. I mean, if you're colorblind, what's blue or red or whatever. Uh, and I didn't know what homesickness was until I became homesick. Uh, so we moved back to Cambridge, where I'd gone to school, and I'd grown up in New England, not all that far from Cambridge. And uh, we got a place near Harvard Square, and I was looking forward to all the things that go on at Harvard, not just in computer science, but in the Kennedy Center. What you were a Radcliffe Fellow. I'm sure you enjoyed your time there.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we got back there just about the time that COVID hit. So I remember being in a workshop. I think Mill and Tomby had organized at Harvard, and around that time, and thinking, wait a minute, should I be here? Because people came from all over the world, and I think
Mm.
there was an example of a situation where some meeting, not at Harvard, but some kind of
Yeah.
meeting with a company or something had become a kind of hotbed of
COVID.
COVID. I didn't know if I knew about that at the time, but I was just thinking, if somebody came up to me and, nice fellow, wanted to shake hands, and then I was like, wait a minute, should I be shaking hands? Because then we eventually all
Yeah.
started fist bumping, I guess. Uh, so I think I was there the first day, but didn't come back on the second day, and I spent uh, time on my couch in about
Yeah.
a mile from Harvard Square,
Yeah.
attending events at Harvard, which was ironic because I could have been on a couch in Cork, but I tell people at least I was in the same time zone.
Yes.
Also,
I
being close to
get
MIT was an advantage, and I hope to connect there more, and that has been harder because of COVID too, of course, and also my thesis advisor was Pat Winston, and I was looking forward to
Yeah.
connecting with him again. And sadly, he passed away soon after I got back to Cambridge.
Yeah. Okay. But now you can go in person, join events.
I'm still, I'm kind of cautious, I have a mask and whatnot, but I'm trying, after 4 years, I'm, trying to become a little more adventurous, and I am planning on going to CP in a
Yeah.
week or two
Exactly.
in Spain, in Girona,
Mm-hmm.
where I know you're giving an invited talk, which I'm looking forward to hear. In fact, I'm introducing you, so
Yes.
that would be
Looking
great.
forward to that. Meeting you there and many others. So, okay, so we went through your life, professional life, graduate students, and then becoming a professor, setting up labs, and so on. So now let's see what's your point of view on the development of this constraint programming community and research. So take us back a little bit to the early days of CP. How do you think this whole area of research started?
Well, actually, Alan Mackworth and I wrote a chapter for your handbook of constraint programming that you helped edit, that talks some about the history. Uh, a lot of the early work in constraints, I think, actually did come out of the vision community. Uh, I remember being at a workshop. I eventually moved away from vision, but I remember being at a workshop fairly early on, or a conference where I was in a session, which was a vision session. And my paper had nothing to do with vision at that point. I think it just, people think, oh, Freuder, he does vision, we'll put him in this session. Um, but eventually we started having workshops of our own, as it were. And I won't mention the year, but at what I think was the first workshop devoted to constraint processing as opposed to constraint logic programming,
Mhm.
uh, I think that was where we met. It was at a NIJCAI workshop, and I remember in particular, for some reason, standing on a plaza, a big plaza out near the conference site. I doubt if you remember this, but A few of us were talking about constraints, and I was trying to make some point in probably my halting way, and someone interrupted me, and you stood up for me. You said, "Wait,
Really?
let's hear what he has to say." And we've been friends ever since.
Okay, good, good.
Yeah.
I don't remember,
So
but I'm happy I did it. Yeah.
there, there eventually were these workshops that led directly to the conference, and at the second of those workshops, some of us got together in. I recall it was in a basement bar in the building that we were in, uh, perhaps, and the idea. Okay, we were discussing, becoming a real full-fledged conference instead of just a workshop. So the question came up, what should we call the conference? And it was suggested we just call it the Constraint Programming Conference. Uh, some of the early pioneers in constraint programming came from programming languages community, so it was natural for them to think we should call it constraint programming. But I came out of AI, artificial intelligence, so that seemed a little limiting to me, and uh, we eventually settled on, which basically the name of the workshop, Principles and Practice of Constraint Programming. So not it had been the PPC workshop, but now it was the International Conference on Principles and Practice of Constraint Programming. And that seemed, reasonably inclusive, and I couldn't think of anything better at the time. So uh, that's what it was. But I should have known that if it was a victory, it was a Pyrrhic victory, because it's just too much of a mouthful. I mean, international conference and principles of practice, very quickly became the Constraint Programming Conference, or just CP. I mean, it wasn't even PPCP anymore; it was CP, and CP it has remained ever since. When I was trying to find a name for the journal, it was still difficult to find an inclusive name, so I finally kind of punted and just called the name of the journal Constraints, and figured that was really inclusive. Though, it's not sort of the most welcoming name for a journal, I guess, Constraints, but
Yes. No, but for the research people, I think it was more inclusive in the constraint programming. But I remember that, those workshops were also, I mean, even though they were not a fully fledged conference, they were also very, uh, full of energy and enthusiasm, of different people that were meeting with different experiences. And they were in these also special places. Like I remember one on an island with orcas all around us, no?
yeah,
Um,
that was the second one where we came up with the name for the conference. And yeah, there was, especially for me, I'm not a big adventurous traveler, so to say I went, was it Orcas Island, to say I went there, but then I find that whenever I tell someone, I went to this place, they've been
yeah.
there.
So then the conference started, and I think that was in 1995 or six, and it was in France, right?
Yes, it was in a lovely location in the south of France.
Where, yes,
It,
in
it,
in a place where they took us also around the coast in these so-called calanques. So there were interesting excursions in this constraint programming conference. But but it was, I remember the first picture that we did in this conference with all the participants, and it was really a very uh, a great feeling. I think I don't know if you share that, to see this thing taking place, for the first time.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, my memory of the Calanques is probably not as pleasant as yours, because,
Yeah, I remember you didn't like that.
well, it was a wonderful idea. It was wonderful to see them. They were taking us from the site of the conference to the site of the banquet, and it was a great idea. They took us in these little boats, these little motor boats, on the Mediterranean, and they showed us these calanques, which are like, for people who don't know what a calanque is, and that's probably 99% of the population. They're we just I just happen to know because we were there. They're like mini fjords, They you go
Yeah.
into them and you see these towering cliffs, and it's wonderful. Unfortunately, it wasn't so wonderful for me because I'm prone to motion sickness,
Mhm.
I quickly became a bit queasy from the choppy seas, and then they weren't satisfied with showing us one kalank. They would take us and show us a kalank, and then they would come out, and then they'd take us into another kalank, and then another kalank, and that was fine, and it was great to see them for everybody. But for me, it was like I began to think like one kalank, you've seen one kalank, you've seen them all, just get me on dry land. And fortunately, when they finally did get me on dry land, I recovered pretty quickly, so I could enjoy what I'm sure was a wonderful banquet.
Yeah. And yeah, and one of the reasons that was in France, because France was really a place with many people working, in constraint programming, especially, and starting from Alan Cormorauer, you remember, who was there at that conference, and many, many others.
Right. It's the France has always been a special place and a hotbed of constraint programming. And of course, the conference has gone on now we're coming up on our 30th anniversary.
Yes.
At the uh, at the 25th anniversary, which was in the U.S., I organized a little website where I chose a paper from each of the 25 conferences and by some method that's explained on the website, and asked people to write a little commentary on their paper. I was kind of inspired, I guess, by some kind of volume that Alan Mackworth and I had been involved in AI Journal, and most everyone was able to do that, and it's still at my website if people are interested. Uh, at the time of the conference, I think the publisher was making all the volumes freely available to us, so it was easy to actually get the actual paper and the commentary. The commentaries are interesting, and you don't, I think, all that often get to experience something like that where people can talk about where the idea came from or where the research led to or whatever. And I think it makes for an interesting
Mm.
collection. And then at the upcoming 30th anniversary conference, I'm organizing a panel where I've invited all the previous program chairs that are able to attend to get together on stage and share some of their memories and thoughts. And that should be quite interesting. And I've asked people to provide a little written something, just very short, that I can post at the Constraints Google group, and people who weren't there or who can read and comment on, ask questions, or the people who were in the audience, we're hoping to give them time to participate, but they can participate more on the Google group perhaps. So I think it's nice to kind of recognize these anniversaries and see if we can do something to remember them. It's just great that we've been going strong for 30 years now.
Mhm. So, so these were the experiences, but let's go a little bit into the content of the research. So, in particular, you wrote a very influential paper with Alan Mackworth that was recognized as one of the most influential papers um, of the first 50 volumes of the AI journal. So, can you tell us something about the content of that paper?
Yeah, that was the volume I was just referring to. Alan and I got a chance to write a kind of revisited short piece. The paper came about in a kind of interesting way. I was at some kind of conference or workshop or something, and met a student of Alan's, uh, and we got talking, and then the student uh, told Alan that it appeared that we were working on the same thing. We were both working on a proof of the complexity of our consistency, I guess. And uh, Alan called me up and said, "Why don't we collaborate?" And that was just he didn't say, "Oh, I got to rush out my work and get it published before Freuder does." He called me up and said, "Let's collaborate," and that was the genesis of that paper. And we've been great friends for many years now.
Yeah, I remember that the beginning of my, interest and work in constraint programming, I had these two papers. One was this paper, and the other one was the paper of my supervisor, Ugo Montanari, on the path consistency, right?
Mhm.
So these two papers were really the beginning for me to think about and learn about constraint reasoning and programming. On your webpage, you have your contribution to constraint programming, and you divide your contribution into four categories. Can you tell us about these four categories?
Sure. Just briefly to provide some framework for the work. Of course, there's work on foundational work, such as K consistency work, for example. There's work on extensions, like soft constraints, where you've made a marvelous contribution, and there's work on automation, like constraint acquisition, and work on application, like configuration. I noticed that, in fact, that there's a workshop on configuration being held in conjunction with the CP conference. It's coming up soon. I think it's maybe their 26th workshop or something. And when they talk a bit about the history of that conference, they mentioned that it started with an IJCAI, let's see, no, I think it was a AAAI symposium
Mm-hmm.
that Boy Faltings and I organized many years ago. And it was just wonderful to see this thing. I haven't been working in configuration for some time, but it was wonderful to see this thing that Boy and I helped get started still going strong so many years later.
Yeah, and I remember that when I came and visited you in Cork at the 4C lab, we worked together, and I think we even published a paper on constraint configuration with one of your students, the one with the very long name that I can't.
Ah, Shabalit. I can sort of pronounce his first name. I assume that's who you mean. I can sort of pronounce his first name, but
Yeah,
I don't think I've ever been able to
yeah,
pronounce his last name.
yeah. So configuration is still one. It has been for a long time an interesting, useful application of constraints, right? Um, So you, besides your academic work, you also collaborated with companies, industrial environments. Can you tell us about that kind of experience?
Yeah, when I was a grad student, and when I was, looking for my first job, I somehow had the idea that industry was really boring and that people in industry were really boring. And then, when I got into academia and then, uh, started reaching out to industry or interacting with industry, I discovered that wasn't true, that work in industry and the people in industry could be very interesting. And one of my best experiences was having the opportunity to serve on the technical advisory board of a company called iLog, which has since been acquired by IBM. And in addition to meeting with some very bright people, there was a fringe benefit that this was a French company which was based in Paris. And
Mhm.
so, we would have these meetings in Paris. And this terrible, terrible imposition that I have having to go to Paris, which is, of course, one of my favorite cities and probably one of almost everyone's favorite cities. Um, and and then they had other locations. I recall once we had to be in the south of France, another terrible burden. So it was both a a sort of intellectually interesting experience and one that came with fringe benefits.
Yeah, but do you think that even at that time, there was a very strong link between research and what people in these companies were doing, or they were using a much simpler technology, or I don't know. So, what do you think was the connection between research and their products, for example?
Well, I don't know in detail. I do know that in general, working with industry can give you can be a source of inspiration. The problems they have can inspire sort of
Or research?
more general problems that can be academically interesting problems. And I recall one in terms of how they how the two relate. I recall one interesting occasion when I'd been involved in some work. I think it was on an inverse consistency. And I was at the meeting with iLog, and they seemed quite interested in this inverse consistency. And I actually couldn't figure out why, because um, I can't recall the details. I suspect that we had at least at that point shown much of a increase in speed using it.
Mhm.
But I believe it turned out that they were interested in it because um, uh, in terms of space rather than time. I think it may have been, quite efficient in terms of its use of space, and maybe at least at that time, maybe that was an issue for them, and so that was
Oh,
kind
you
of
mean
eye-opening.
space for storing the variable domains and the constraint and the table of the constraints.
Whatever they needed to for the algorithms, yeah.
Yeah.
So it was. Um, as I say, it was just, if nothing else, it was eye-opening to see what bright, interesting people that you could find in industry.
Hmm. Um, and your relationship with industry was also in terms of raising a lot of funds for C Lab, for also for hiring then students or everything that the lab needed. So tell us a little bit about that experience. Was it easy to raise funds for constraint reasoning projects?
So I had government funding and I had industry funding. One thing that I found about obtaining industry funding, I'll give a little heuristic to for those who are trying to do that. It's a very it sounds maybe obvious when you but it's the key word for me there is ask. Okay. Uh, I once, I think, gave a talk about how to interact with industry, and I think that was my key takeaway. You know, I found that you could be talking with somebody in industry at a conference, for example,
Yeah.
and you could be talking and talking, and they could be really interested in what you were saying, and be going great. But after a while, you might be sort of thinking internally, show me the money, because it's nice to interact, but it's also nice to get some funding. As you say, you could maybe support a grad student, and the grad student could have the funding and have the chance to interact with industry. And but I found that they don't tend to volunteer that. But if you ask, they may be very open to it. They may say, "Oh, that's a great idea. Sure, we do that kind of thing," or I can look into, there's a program for it. I can look into that, or um, so the key is now you don't have to be obnoxious about it, of course. You don't have to say literally show me the money. You can say, do you work with? Have you worked with academia? Do you ever support students or whatever? And kind of ease into it, and it may work. When I was at UNH, in New Hampshire. I actually had a program which I think worked reasonably well there, where I had a membership program. the company could buy a membership in our industry program, and I think that may have been easier, in at least in some cases, for the people to sell to their company or account for in their books or whatever, than another kind of grant. So, where there's a will, there's a way, and it can be profitable both financially and in terms of the experience and the ideas and the opportunities for your students to work with industry.
Yeah, and what you said is when you give this advice about just ask, it reminded me that besides your contribution in research and many other in constraints research, but also that you gave a contribution at the meta level. So how to write a research paper, how to give a talk, how to relate with industry, which are also important contribution, especially for young people, no? That don't know how to do these things effectively, no, correctly. So that's, I think, is also a very important thing, and I think that people can find also those presentations on your website.
There, thanks. I think one reason maybe why I've done some of this is that some of this doesn't come naturally to me, and so maybe I've thought about it a bit more. And I do have some tips at my website for how to give a talk. People are interested, and there's lots out there on the web. Of course, people may have different ideas about how to do it, but my heuristics. Some of them at the top level are there at my website.
And I remember that now that you said things don't come naturally to me, that you always told me that the reason why you worked in constraint reasoning is because it's very difficult for you to make decisions in real life, multi-criteria decision, all these pros and cons, constraints, soft constraints, and so on. So basically you said, oh, maybe constraint programming, constraint reasoning can help me in making it easier, right?
Well, yes and no. So it reminds me of my high school debating coach. I think I was president of my debating club, but he would tell us that don't think this is going to help you when you get in an argument with your spouse. So. Uh, I'm not sure if constraint programming actually helped me in a real practical way to decide what TV to get or whatever, but they do say that those who can't um, do teach, and those who can't teach do research. And so I've been doing this research. I do tell people, if they want to know what I do, I say I help computers help people make better decisions. But in terms of making my own day-to-day decisions, I'm still there was another fellow at 4C who maybe was similar, and we or other people used to joke that if we had to like buy a TV, we would go out and get which TV magazine and I think that it's I guess the funny part is that we would I don't know if we really did it, but you could argue that we would study which thing to get for so long that by the time we made a decision, there was a new model that came out.
Exactly.
And we'd have to get a new magazine and start all over. So there was I can't claim to be a great decision maker, but hopefully that doesn't impact too much on my ability to help computers help people make decisions.
So, and a term that people use in constraint programming that you are well known for is this holy grail of CP. So, what is meant by that? What do you mean by that?
So that is sort of interesting genesis too, that there was a workshop on strategic directions for computer science or something like that. That was held, I think it was an ACM workshop many years ago. and it was broken up into different groups, and there was a group on constraint, sort of constraint programming or something, and I was invited to participate. And I think it's wonderful to have something like that once in a while. I mean, we all get so caught up in, the next paper, the next committee meeting, the next class we have to teach, whatever. And it's good to step back once in a while and try to think big thoughts, try to think strategically. And my idea at the time was this Holy Grail idea that the Holy Grail of computer science, in some sense, is that you just go up to the computer, state your problem in whatever way is convenient to you, and the computer solves it. Sort of like Hal in 2001 in the movie, but without the paranoia. And my thinking was that constraint programming was, a good route to tackle a search for that Holy Grail, in that it was a declarative language. There was, a lot of talk at the time about declarative versus imperative or whatever. And so, in theory, at least, with the constraint programming, you just state the model, and then there are these powerful algorithms behind the scene that'll solve it for you, general purpose algorithms. Now, of course, that's a vast oversimplification, but I did present this vision of the Holy Grail, and have been pursuing it and encouraging its pursuit ever since. I wrote a couple of follow-up papers. I established a while back a Progress Towards the Holy Grail workshop, and there's been some very interesting work presented there. In fact, we're having the latest version again very soon at the CP conference in Girona. And I've organized a panel there on some title is something like, "Have chatbots reached the Holy Grail?" Because now everything's chatbots and they can do these amazing things. And have they already reached the Holy Grail for us? Can we close the workshop? No, I don't think. I think the answer is no. But it's sort of no, but within the but part is the interesting part, and so hopefully we'll have an interesting discussion there.
Okay, so you contributed to CP in many different ways, not just with research. In fact, the Association of Constraint Programming has these two awards, the Research Award and the Distinguished Service Award. And I think that you are the only recipient of both awards. So Distinguished Service recognition and the research recognition. So how do you see this? How do you feel about receiving both awards?
Well, I'm very pleased, of course, very honored. I think, in particular, I like to encourage people to think about service. There's the danger, the we call the tragedy of the commons, where there's something that everyone can do, but then nobody does it, and it's good for people to volunteer. Sometimes you get a call, a general call goes out for volunteers, and then, again, everybody's busy. There's their own thing. Maybe think somebody else will do it. You might think about volunteering for some of those opportunities, or to be proactive. To look around. There's some needs that the community has, or some opportunities. Maybe something you've seen in another community that we don't have that you could propose to the ACP, or just do it. And it's not only good for the community, it can be good for you. It's not entirely altruistic. You can get something to put on your CV, or you can get better known in the community, and it's just the satisfaction of doing something for the community.
Right. So of course, these two awards are not the only awards that you got. You got many others, and in fact, you even got an the Research Excellence Award, and I think you used some of the proceeds from that award to start a new award for the Association of Constraint Programming, which recognizes young members of the community, because the Research Excellence Award is more for senior members that have spent many years contributing to Constraint. So can you tell us how that came about and what this new award means?
Yeah, I was, of course, incredibly pleased and honored to get the Ichkai Award, and to my surprise, it came with a small monetary stipend, and so I thought, well, I could have them give that to the ACP if the ACP was interested in setting up this early career award, and they latched onto that, and it seemed to me to be nicely symmetric because, as you say, the Ichkai Award is a career award, and we at the ACP we had a doctoral thesis award, and we had a research excellence award, but it seemed like a nice symmetrical thing to do to set up an early career award with the proceeds of my career or late career, if you like, award. And I've been pleased to see that take off. And the only disappointment was that, again, this sort of took off just about the time that COVID took off. And so I haven't been there to personally congratulate the recipients, but as I say, I will be at CP this year, and I've gotten in touch with the recipients, and uh, I've floated the idea that starting a tradition maybe that the people who have received the award could get together when they're at CP and
Mhm.
share a meal together, and maybe let me join them if they would. And we're going to do that for the first time this year in Girona. There'll be a couple of the recipients there, and looking forward to getting together with them.
Mhm. Very nice. So, speaking of these young people in the community, so do you have any advice or research heuristics, that could be useful to them in navigating the research area of CP?
Yeah, well, as you say, I've given various tutorials or talks, and one of them was on how to be a PhD student. I think that had some heuristics, research heuristics there. Let me just give you two heuristics, one strategic and one tactical. So the strategic heuristic would be to be bold, but to be bold with a backup. So when you're choosing a thesis topic, for example, think about something which, if people see that headline, that title, they'll think, "Wow, they really did that." I want to see that. On the other hand, you don't want to be pursuing that bold agenda for 50 years as a PhD student. So, it'd be good to have a plan B, a backup, maybe getting part of the way there or some component of that would still be a good thesis. And maybe you can keep working on it after you get your PhD. A tactical heuristic that's worked well for me has been generalized. So, um, K consistency, for example.
Mhm.
you know, there was node consistency, arc consistency, and path consistency. And when you think about it that way, in terms of the graph, constraint graph, node, arc, path, well, that's it, right? But you can also think of it as one consistency, two consistency, and three consistency because path consistency can be reduced to three consistency.
Yeah.
And when you think about it as one, two, three, then it's natural, well, why not
Okay.
four or five or six? And why not K? So K consistency. Uh, Another example would be backtrack free search. And then I later wrote a paper on backtrack bounded search. There's an interesting story I like to tell actually about backtrack free search. I once found my backtrack free search paper referenced in another paper, and the reference had a typo. So instead of saying backtrack free search, it said backtrack free research. So I wish I had been able to write that paper.
Yes, to never go back to your research path. Um, okay, any other advice for young people starting out at this point in time? So, with the current AI environment, research environment.
Uh, so Um, so I have a couple of thoughts, maybe not specifically for this environment, but uh, I think in general, one isn't always taught explicitly all the things that one will need to do when one gets out into the world and uh, gets your first position as an assistant professor or first position in industry. You may find that you want to or need to uh, organize a workshop or write a grant proposal or what have you. And you may not have been taught how to do that the way you're taught, how to program in Lisp or whatever. I guess you're probably not taught how to program in Lisp anymore, but anyway. Uh, so, uh, it, giving a talk is an example. I think you maybe alluded to that earlier. I've given tutorials on how to give a talk. Actually, I think at least one occasion, I think I entitled it "How Not to Give a Talk." So I had a little gimmick where I was
I
saying,
remember.
did you do this? No, don't do it. And uh, if I had to, that's a whole tutorial, but if I had to reduce it to one word, the word would be enthusiasm. Uh, a lot of talks, people are really serious. It's understandable they're serious or they're, a little not sure about their English or whatever, or they're nervous and, can become very deadly dull. And nowadays, if you're sitting in the audience, you can see people doing their email instead of because they're, paying attention to the talk. And I very much sympathize because, like I say, I'm not a natural speaker. I'm not good at showing enthusiasm myself. Um, and but if you're not enthusiastic, how do you expect the audience to be? So, and I think Jung said that there are no pure introverts or extroverts. We each have a bit of each, and if anybody was a pure one or the other, they'd be in an insane asylum. So, even if you're an introvert like I am, there may be some bit of extroversion within you that you can draw upon. You remember the time of your school basketball team won the championship or whatever, and you were jumping up and down and try to convey, because I'm sure you are enthusiastic about the work you're doing. It's just a matter of, conveying that to the audience. Um, and more generally, you can be proactive about seeking out, seeking to educate yourself, as it were, in some of these other things. You can volunteer to some professor that's organizing a conference. You can volunteer to help them and see how it's done and get some experience, meet some people. You can seek mentoring. You can seek advice. I have some advice about giving a talk on my website, but somebody else might have different advice, and you can look for various kinds of advice and compare what you see and decide what you think is right or what's best for you. Okay. So, be proactive about it. There is, yeah, there's a lot that you have to do as a grad student, of course, and, maybe step back a bit and think about what you could do proactively. And that's, in general, a advice for people starting out is, you have to teach the next course, you want to get this grant proposal in, whatever. Maybe take time once in a while, like I was kind of forced to do with that strategic directions workshop years ago, and think about, try to think big thoughts, try to think strategically, um, get away from the day-to-day metrics and KPIs and so on. Think about uh, where you want to be, what your place is. Maybe there's some place you can get in on the ground floor or be a pioneer.
Mhm.
So think about what you want to achieve and what your goals are, your research goals and your other goals.
Yeah, and also don't, as you say, no, don't be shy or intimidated by the fact that you are young and you come into a place where senior people, no, be very proactive because people like to talk, even senior people in general like to hear from students. So, yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, don't be afraid at a conference to go up to some senior person at a coffee break.
Mhm.
They might be standing all, it's like, well, they might be standing, alone, and
Mhm.
people might be afraid to go up to them, and they just stand there and wish somebody to come up to them. But whatever, as you say, people, I think, I mean, somebody, whatever, maybe somebody's jet lagged and doesn't want to talk to anybody. That's okay too. But don't be a pest. But I think generally speaking, people are happy to talk to young people, and you can have that experience and maybe get some mentoring, and maybe it will lead to a postdoc down the road. And
Right,
don't be
right.
afraid to mingle and meet people. At a particularly if you go to a conference, you can meet people, not meet people your own age or your own rank or whatever, and but also don't be afraid to try to make some contacts with the senior people.
Okay, so why don't we end with some this very nice chat with your thoughts about where the field is going, where the CP research area is going. What do you think, how it will evolve in the future?
Yeah, well, I think isn't there some saying about everything's easy to predict except the future. So I mean, maybe there'll be a breakthrough in quantum computing tomorrow, and they'll just upend everything. But I do think, especially in the near future, you know, AI is the future, and we are part of AI. I once gave a senior track talk at AAAI conference on the ubiquity of constraints, trying to make the case that you can find constraints in all different subfields of AI and all kinds of applications. And particularly at the moment, there's both a challenge and an opportunity. I think uh, all the traditional fields of AI are facing a challenge at the moment, that they don't just sort of get obscured in the glare of attention that's being paid to large language models and chatbots. But I think a lot of people who specialize in large language models and chatbots would say that it's important that we don't forget these other areas of AI, and that they do have a role to play, and large language models and chatbots, as impressive as they are not the be all and end all. Um, so I think there's a particular opportunity to bring together CP and some of this new work, machine learning in particular, and we've been trying to do that. There's been machine learning tracks at the CP conference for some time now. Barry O'Sullivan and I have organized the past couple of years a bridge event, so-called, at AAAI on CP and ML.
Mhm.
And one of the talks this most recent bridge, for example, uh, there was material on how to uh, apply constraint programming uh, uh, toward one of the key problems with chatbots, that they hallucinate.
Mhm.
I mean, I found that out when I was first playing with them a while ago, and asked them some question about constraints, and it came back with this wonderfully coherent sounding answer, and even pointed to some specific papers to back up its argument. And, because one of the papers at least had a co-author whom I knew is Peter Van Beek. And I contacted Peter and I said, "Did you write this paper?" And he said, "No, he'd never heard of the paper." So they can't hallucinate. And there was some interesting talk about how CP could be relevant there.
Mhm.
That would be wonderful. So um, there's also a JAIR. I want to put in a plug for this Journal of Artificial Intelligence Research track that's just started on constraint programming, machine learning, that I'm
Mhm.
involved in. And this track will run for some time, and there'll be enough people can submit to this track. And of course, there's the progress towards the Holy Grail. Workshops in machine learning has always been relevant there. And I think I mentioned the panel that we're planning this year. So this is an obvious, as I say, a challenge and opportunity. I think everybody should think about this question about the future and where AI should be going and where it can and where CP should be going, where it could go. There's a passage from Lewis Carroll that I think you've heard me quote before that I like. Alice is talking to the Queen, and Alice is saying something about how you can't believe impossible ideas, and the Queen is indignant. The Queen says, "Of course you can." She says that she's sometimes believed as many as 6 impossible ideas before breakfast. So I would encourage everyone to think about something that's impossible, but that maybe they can make possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very nice. So is there anything else that you want to say that we didn't cover that you want to tell the people who are going to watch this video?
No, I think that's probably a good note to end on if you're creating your own future by thinking possible
Making the
thoughts.
impossible possible.
Right.
Yes. Okay, good. So I really enjoyed this chat. I hope, all the people who are going to watch it will enjoy it as well. And of course, all the things that Gene mentioned, you can find them as he mentioned on his website that is easy to find. Um, and also at the Constraint Programming Conference is online. You can see all the activities. And I really, really enjoyed this um, remembering, from your point of view of all your activities, your career, your contributions, your awards, some of them, and also advice for young people and what you think the future will bring us. Many, many impossible things that will become possible, I guess. So thank you, Jean. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it too, and I've been inspired. I think I may try to don't know if I get around to it, but I may try to write up a little mini memoir that memorializes some of these thoughts and expands on them. But it's certainly been wonderful to have this opportunity to share this with you.
Okay. Okay, thanks. And bye, everybody. I hope you enjoy it just like us. Bye bye, Jean.
Bye.